171S. That's the substitute. The original bill was LC 510154. I'll tell a story and then I'll go through the substitute. We can talk about the original if we decide that's a better path. So the sheriff had reached out, and I didn't know this. I don't have my area is not particularly rural, but the west part of my county is. So we're kind of a divided county. A third where I represent is pretty developed. It's kind of like West Cobb type of and then West Paulding, 2/3 is pretty rural, lots of farms, generational things. But he calls and he says, "Hey, did you know that the sheriffs are responsible for livestock that gets loose?" And I always thought it was animal control because most of my people around me have pets, not livestock. Animal control, I guess, is pet related. And so what's happening is there are people who have animals that get loose, and they look for the owners. Oftentimes, especially potbelly pigs, things like that, the owners don't raise their hands and say, "Hey, I'm the owner of this." Or if it's a horse that's in bad shape or different things, these animals get out. And so they go through the process of trying to sell these animals, but there's not a market sometimes to sell these animals. Sometimes there is, and they do sell them. But there's not a market to sell potbelly pigs, apparently. And you can't eat them. And they're almost considered pets, but they're livestock. So they're getting out. There's no market to sell them, so they have to kill them per the law. And sometimes that could be a little bit challenging because a lot of times people see potbelly pigs as a pet, not as livestock. Could be for other things too. Horses who, like I said, maybe have been not taken care of well, and not in good shape. There's not an opportunity to sell that. But maybe a farmer down the street or a horse farm or rehabilitation center or something, or they would be happy to take him or, take it on and feed it and give it the remaining days a good life. That's what was presented to me as, this is a problem we're having. We have an opportunity to give these away. And in some cases they are giving them away, but they're breaking the law to do it. And can you help me out? Can we figure out how to fix this? So the initial bill was the fix. It was our county attorney got together with me and the sheriff. And we got with legislative council and kind of mocked it up. And what it was doing was basically saying one of the options besides selling it and besides killing it was just donating it to a rescue organization or a private party. And then when we came here, we heard there's a problem. I think the Cattlemen's Association has a little bit of a rub with that. They were worried about someone coming in with bad motives and cutting a fence and being in cahoots with the sheriff, potentially cattle getting out, and all of a sudden their cattle being given away to somewhere, a little safety zone or something. And that's not the goal. So we're trying to not make that a potential. So that's where the substitute comes in. Again, that's 510171S. And what it does is it says that if there's one animal that they find one potbelly pig, or they find one horse or one cow or whatever it is, the 3-day process goes where they are waiting to figure out if they find the owner. And if they can't find the owner, then the livestock can be given away. That's an option. That's the only, can be given away. Otherwise, if they find multiple, they find a herd of, they find a bunch of cows or 2 cows or 5 horses or 2 donkeys or, 3 goats or whatever. They go through the process they go through today, but they also have the ability to give it away versus killing it or selling it if there's not a market to sell it. If there's a market to sell it, they're going to sell it. But that's what we're trying to do with the bill. I think we've been working hard since yesterday with the Cattlemen's Association, Will Bentley and Dale, with agribusiness, Dale with the Cattlemen's Association, Will with the agribusiness, trying to figure out some, where can we go from here? With the sub, my sheriff is good with that. I think I'll have to let Dale and them speak to where they are on it. But happy if there's other suggestions for us to get through this, to talk those through too.
Thank you, Representative. We also, I think, before I take questions, I think we've got Sheriff Gary Cutledge Village on video, and I think he would like to speak to the bill and might give you a little more insight into the issues he's having up in his area. So, David, if you could get him. Can you hear us, Sheriff?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good to have you this morning. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank y'all for taking the time to help us out with this bill. Our biggest issue here is 95% probably potbelly pigs. People are taking these in as, small, cute little cuddly pets, and then they turn into a 200-300 pound problem for them. They get loose in subdivisions. We have issues finding the owner. The owner won't fess up. Yeah, this is mine. I want it back. And of course, the law requires we either sell them, and there's no sale for them. There's no market for them. And the other part of the law says we'll euthanize them. I'm not into killing healthy animals unless it's something that we're going to, feed off of and eat, or donate to somebody that will eat it. So we're looking for a way to move these animals and not have to store them. And of course, I'm responsible for the caretaking of them and the feeding of them. So I talked to Joseph about trying to get us a bill where most of the time we can come up with somebody that will take these animals and put them on their farm, feed them and keep them up, and their kids play with them and they can pet them and whatever. So that's what we was trying to look for. And Joseph brought up a point that they was worried about, large amounts of cattle or horses. We really never had that issue here. Most of the time, especially with cattle, they're expensive animals. They have a use for food or for having calves, and they're pretty easy to return to the owner. The owner's real tickled when we find their cows and return them to them. I'm willing to answer any questions anybody may have for me, and that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate you being willing to testify here and answer any questions. I'll ask the committee while we got you there if they've got any other questions of you. I know I've got several here. Is anybody with a raise of hand want to ask the sheriff anything? Why don't you just hang on, and if you can, and we'll see where these questions go.
I'll stay with you.
So Representative Donahue.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me ask a question, and now you explained it pretty well that your problem is the potbelly pigs, pretty much over anything else. But we pass this for the state, you're looking at a lot more probably cows and different things getting out. Representative Tommy Benton and I talked about this weekend, his Saturday. They called him and said he had cows out. So finally his son was contacted. His son-in-law, he called him. They came down, it wasn't a cow or two, it was 18 cows. So that was a problem, but he was contacted within an hour or two. What is the process of knowing whose cows are potbelly pigs? Do we have a process of knowing most of the time within a 3-day period to call someone or find this person? And how many times are we reaching out to find this person throughout that day?
Yeah, I can't speak to the process of what the real life scenario is. I just know that what the problem is and how to solve it, what we're trying to solve as. If Sheriff Gullidge knows, the process that we do in Paulding County might be different everywhere. I have no idea, but maybe you can take that one. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a simple. Most of the time, of course, we're out in these communities all the time. We know who's got the cows. Anywhere there's one loose, they're usually not too far from where their home base is. There's nothing to beat knocking on doors and talking to neighbors and trying to find out who they belong to and track down the owner. Usually with cattle and horses, it's pretty easy to find the owner, and they're more than happy to take them back. A lot of times we wind up putting them back in their pasture and letting them know their fences are down or tore up, or got a tree down on the fence, and they'll get them fixed and repaired and maintain their livestock.
Thank you. And the follow-up is, I just had that concern. I like the sub a lot better, and I understand what you're trying to do, and I do not have a problem with it. I just know mine, around the area I've seen where people have cut fence, and then the cows get out and they wander around, and you wonder like, well, I checked the fence, what happened? And they have been cut. So that was just one of the initiatives that I want to make sure that we handle. And again, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Got a couple more questions, Representative Mitchell.
Thank you. And this is fascinating that there is a roving potbelly pig problem in Georgia. Question for you. What is preventing the sheriff from selling the potbelly pigs for a penny to a rescue right now?
I don't know that.
Is that a viable solution?
The lady with animal control is here with us, Eileen Culberson. I think she would probably be better to address that if you wouldn't mind listening to her for a second.
The screen says Jason Phillips, but the speaker is Eileen Culberson.
Hey, I'm over animal control. So there's really not a rescue. It's very hard to find a rescue for potbelly pigs. We can find a farm for them a whole lot easier than finding a rescue that's going to take them, if that helps.
Well, and right now, could that farm pay a penny to get that potbelly pig? Because right now we have a potbelly pig problem, and this law would change for all livestock. But if the solution could be that, yes, you have to sell them, but the value can be basically nothing, which it sounds like market value it is, does that not work?
If I may, I serve as the county attorney. My name is Jason Phillips. I would say that under that scenario, it is certainly a possibility. However, we are required under the state of the law to engage in advertising and then go out and conduct the sale. And while there may or may not be a buyer for a penny, the last time I was involved, I sold a horse for $1. But we have to go through this process, which takes time, money, and effort. And that is why we'd like to have the donation possibility, because that eliminates a lot of the, I would say, needless inefficiencies in the case where we have just one animal.
And I am assuming that process with the advertisement is actually because these animals theoretically are lost and the advertisement gives folks the opportunity to see it. So we would want to maintain that advertisement process, even if the end ends up being a donation versus a sale. Is that correct?
Yes, we go through there's a 3-day process that is not changing under this, where we are taking both informal and formal steps to find the owners of these animals, so we don't have to take it any further. And I think the number one goal of the statute is to get these animals back where they came from. It's just the problem arises is when the owners don't come forward, what are our tools for disposal at that point?
Yeah. Sorry, I had 2 questions. I'll just put them together so that I give up the mic. One is, this is currently, as it stands, prioritizing rescue over private individuals in a way that doesn't differentiate whether that rescue is capable of providing equivalent services. So if I have a local rescue that predominantly takes dogs and I have a horse, I may have a private individual who is more equipped to take that horse, but as this is written, it would prioritize the rescue that does not specifically specialize in care of horses. It might be worth thinking about the implications of that ordering to make sure that you have the flexibility to make sure if that animal is getting donated, that it's going to the most appropriate environment for that animal.
Yeah, and I think I can speak. I would be willing to do whatever the committee wants to do related to that. It's just the process that was written in. I agree with you that there is a priority over that. That's not an important intent of mine either way.
Thank you. Sorry, the other part of that, because I totally forgot. How are we defining finding a single animal? If I let out 100 sheep, I might find 100 sheep together. If I let out 100 commercial pigs, I am going to find 100 individual commercial pigs. So when we're talking about finding a single animal, you're weirdly going to have to define what that means. Right, but if I find 100, if 100 people call me and they've each found an individual pig, I haven't found one animal, even though each individual found only one animal.
If I may, I can only speak to the experience of animal control in Paulding County. When they respond to a loose animal, you know, that they send the staff out there. The experience is there's either one animal or there's multiple animals. It's not, in factually on the ground, they take what they see. In this scenario, I think the intent with the single animal is to cover most of the times, most of the things that we encounter, certainly not all. In terms of defining it further, I don't know what the wisest way to phrase that would be, but what we see out on the ground is one animal or more than one animal. And we know that if it's only one, our process is going to be a little bit easier if we can't find the owner.
Okay, got another question. Representative Wilson, have you got some input into this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question was, if there was a sale, it looks like, does the money go back to the owner from that sale?
No, it goes to the clerk.
It goes to the clerk, and then I
County clerk.
looked up section 438, and it looks like once all the fees have been paid, then the money goes back to the, whatever's left over after all the fees have been paid, goes back to the owner. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I know it went to the clerk. I don't know about it. Thought it goes to the general fund, but
If I may, I would say if we're at the sale, we presumably don't know who the owner is.
Representative Larry,
Yeah, my understanding is if there's a sale, they don't know who the owner is. If they know who the owner is, they're going to give it back to the owner.
Right.
When they don't know who the owner is, they then have to run the ad in the paper, which is basically a sale or impoundment. The first, there's the notice of impoundment, then there's the notice of sale, and they would sell the animal. And then the money, I think, just would go into the general fund because they don't know who the owner is at that point.
And thank you for that. That was more just curiosity.
That's my understanding from very limited experience.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I think if the author would be amenable, I think an easy fix to the issue that Representative Mitchell brought up on line 78, just change that shall to a may. And I think that fixes everything. Line 78.
70.
so it would be they may donate it, or they may have the livestock killed and dispose of the carcass. So I don't know what the difference is in the shall and the may of that one. We have two options at that point.
Well, I think with the shall, the way it's written currently, this places sort of a priority on first donating to the rescue organization, and then if none is available, to an individual
Yeah, I'm at whatever the will of the committee is. I'm
versus
good.
provide, because and just to make sure, the intent is just to provide an additional option, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever the will of the committee is. I'm good.
Okay, we're gonna probably have one other person maybe speak this bill. We'll hold that thought for a minute, proper time. Representative Wilson can maybe make that amendment or is there anyone else want to speak to this bill? Dale Sandlin with Georgia Cattlemen's Association. I know y'all had concerns with the original bill before this sub came. So go ahead and speak to the committee.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Dale Sandlin, Georgia Cattlemen's Association. First off, I want to thank Representative Gullett here for working with us and trying to make the bill better. We, off the top line, we like the substitute better than the original bill. When you look at the way livestock are treated in the state, they're private property. So we're talking about the notice of impoundment of private property and then the sale thereof. And I can understand why adjusting it down to one animal would help to allow for a reduced cost as far as holding those animals until they can find the owner, and especially in the case where they don't normally find the owners on these potbelly pigs. The concern that we have with the amended, with the substitute would be simply that we're not crazy about the idea of wanting to short circuit that process because we are talking about private property. And I can understand where they're coming from and can appreciate that. As Representative Gillett mentioned, there's not a livestock market for potbelly pigs. Typically, they're not going to enter our food supply, but because they are porcine, they belong in the livestock genre. If we want to avoid this altogether to prevent livestock from being carried into all of this, maybe a simpler way might be to amend the explanation or at least the definition of specialty pet in section 2-13-1, it's 18.1. And what that would do would be provide that caveat that it would include a potbelly pig in that definition. And what that will do ultimately is remove the sheriff altogether from the process of having to care for that animal. It puts it more so as a stray dog or stray cat that would fall under animal control, and they have different mechanisms and keeps the private property rights intact in there. I know as a cattle producer myself, if my cows get out, I want that 3 days because I may be off, working somewhere else. At least allow my neighbors the ability to see that in the newspaper, call me and say, hey, are you missing any cows? They kind of, the description looks like yours. And as the sheriff mentioned, we're tickled pink when we get those cattle back. But at the same time, if we're going to address this and really focus in on how we help the potbelly pig side, our preference would be to adjust that specialty pet definition that would allow for those animals to be handled in a different manner.
I think the 3 days is still there
Yeah.
today in the substitute. It's not change of the 3 days, no matter if you give it away or not. So, but whatever you guys know my problem, however we can help solve it would be awesome. And,
And we want to help solve it. We want to avoid the unintended consequence of lumping everything in, taking a shotgun approach when we need to focus in as more of a rifled approach.
Okay, Representative Dukes, got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm more inclined to go with what it is that you said, because as a representative, what we have here is a pot-bellied pig problem. Yes. So let's address that particular concern. I would recommend and suggest that rather than moving into the possibility of the taking of private property in a manner that is not consistent with what we would figure would say that it is appropriate for the owner. We got a potbelly pig problem. Sounds like you all do in your part of the state. So let's see if we can come up with something. My recommendation would be to come up with something that addresses that. And if that fixes it, let's roll.
Okay, good suggestion, I think, and that's kind of my posture here. I don't know what the committee would maybe want to do. I think we've got a good fix to this bill, and if we can maybe consider, if the committee wants to consider the changes in language and then move this bill and get it over to the Senate, and I think they could possibly take up the specifics of of changing the code to include potbelly pigs out of livestock into a pet. It would be one solution this committee could do if you would like, but it's up to the committee. Questions of Representative Donahue?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you remember, a couple of years ago, we had a problem when the senator's sheriff had a water buffalo getting out. Remember that? And just for that, we changed the law for the whole state of Georgia for one area. And it was like, well, just one guy decided to have some water buffalo and bought a herd of them. So I kind of agree with that. And I think we could work this to help the problem would be just to come back and say potbelly pigs, do that, and then decide definitely how you want to handle it. And I'd like to see it passed too. And you've been very easy. It's like whatever, we can get something done. And I know you well and you bring good stuff, but I want to help you too. But I think that was something I had a problem with. We were like passing it for the whole state of Georgia for water buffalo. And I'm like, well, how many problems we got? Never, just one time. But I want to help that sheriff too.
I will say, I don't think this is just my county's problem. I think this is probably more of like a metro type of suburban problem. Rural maybe don't have potbelly pigs as pets because you got other, your kids have other pets, but more of like I'm suburban Atlanta. I'm sure it's a problem in all the suburban counties there. I'm sure it's a problem in suburbia across the state. So, but I respect that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think, y'all have heard enough times getting, we've had enough testimony on this. What's the will of the committee? I'll entertain a motion, if it's the will of the committee. Got a motion to do pass? Do I have a second? Do I have, discussion or amendment? Representative, Wilson.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment online. And it's going to be different than the amendment I mentioned earlier. On line 79, Mr. Chairman, it would be to add a comma before the word or, and then strike starting with the comma after or through that phrase or the comma after distance. So strike comma if none is available within a reasonable distance, comma.
Okay. So we did, what about the shall in the line? before?
And leave the shall. In speaking
Okay.
with legislative counsel, we believe leaving the shall that way and just striking that phrase still limits the sheriff to these options, but it doesn't say you have to do this one and then this
Okay.
one and then this one.
All right. Everybody is clear on the proposed amendment. Okay, we'll vote on the, I need a second on the amendment. Got a second. So we'll vote on the amendment first and then, so everybody clear? All in favor of the amendment? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the amendment passes. So we need, go on to any other comments, motions to the bill. If not, Representative Dukes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The observation that we made as far as, is there any way possible for us to include within this legislation the carve out that made the potbelly pig a pet rather than an animal, rather than livestock? Is there any place that legislative council could include that in it?
Well, the problem we have is time before crossover. This will be our last committee meeting before crossover. And so that's the posture we in. So we've got a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Got a little more discussion. Representative Mitchell, is that you again?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the reclassifying potbelly pig comment. We would need to be really careful if we did something like that, because right now they're livestock, which is going to mean all of our municipality zoning requirements apply differently if we were to move them out of livestock. So while that is something we should consider in the future, it would probably take a longer window to know the implications of doing something like that.
Okay, caution taken. Okay, we have the amendment is passed. We've got a motion and a second for the bill with the amendment. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes with the amendment. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate y'all's help.
Nothing's real simple up here.
This is like
sometimes,
Judy
is
in
it?
here, man. It's judiciary and ag is the two tough ones to come through. No doubt.
Going to the dogs and the pigs around here.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Representative Ridley.
Yes, sir.
We have a bill 1522. Tell us your experience with beauty pageants. this
I've never
morning.
won, believe it or not.
That does not surprise me.
I figured out when I was younger, when my mama said, bless his heart, I figured out she wasn't talking about my smart. She was talking about my face. This first bill here, the House Bill 1522 LC 510098. This is a great example of saying I'll never do anything in the legislature, because here we are. So let me tell you where this bill came from. This thing hadn't been updated in about 15 years. And with COVID, I guess everybody didn't have anything else better to do when it started ending, and they started figuring out. I got a bunch of complaints, or well, I guess inquiries about when things kind of started opening back up about some beauty pageants and the legitimacy of them. So what we've done, we've been in here, and on line 12, we're going to make just add in there that they have to have a website, and on line 13, they've got to have an email address. That's the only thing that we're doing, and everybody seems to be fine with it. And like I said, all this is doing just kind of for safety and legitimacy reasons.
Okay, thank you for this simple bill. I tell you, my peach queens usually come up and attend when we have invite resolutions, and they have not been able to come in a couple of years.
Well, hopefully we get them back up there after this year.
I hope so too. It would have helped you with this bill if you'd invited them up here today to testify.
Yes, sir. It would have helped me a
It
whole lot.
would.
I'd might have got more signers than just me if I'd had them here.
Are you open to some questions from the committee?
Sure.
All right, I have one from Representative Mitchell.
Thank you. A question for you. Building a website is a little bit complicated.
Sure.
Is this inclusive of things like a Facebook page?
Yeah, and that's-
website? And does that need to be spelled out? I don't know.
Yes, ma'am. No, I mean, I think that's one reason we left it kind of open on that end, was because, I mean, just as long as it's an internet website for that, I mean, you can go on now, you don't really have to build one anymore. You can go on to some of these programs and just pay, and they'll build you a little website for it. But it's just like, that way it shows the address and everything on there and kind of get some updates. But I kind of left it open for that reason. That way we wouldn't specifically saying, you say Facebook, well, down you got some other platforms and you don't include those. And so I think just website is kind of what we came to the conclusion.
And a Facebook page would clearly fit in that definition? Okay, just knowing that these are probably on the smaller side, quite low profit
Sure, yeah, oh,
enterprises,
yeah.
and wanting to make sure that if it costs them, $300 to make a website, that
Sure.
probably isn't viable.
Yeah, I understand completely.
Okay, thank you. We've got some other legislation we need to take up. Time's getting done. I'd entertain a motion at proper time. Representative Cameron, you got? Okay, so I got, do I have a motion? Second. Any other discussion on this bill LC 510098? Okay, we have Representative Beth Camp online. Representative, would you have a question?
Well, I do, and it's just a comment. Sometimes there are individuals that put on beauty pageants, but oftentimes, as you alluded to, there are organizations that put on beauty pageants. I grew up in Dublin, Georgia, and the Miss St. Patrick's was a huge beauty pageant every year. And it was pre-internet, obviously. But going back to that, the city had on their website. Would that suffice if it was not an independent website, but part of another organization's website discussing the beauty pageant?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would, because what we're talking about is like actual companies that do the beauty pageants. I think the other like civic organizations and that kind of stuff, I mean, they wouldn't be really included in this, because like you said, it would be on their personal websites. But this has more to do with like the actual companies that put it out there.
Can I have a follow-up?
I think we're going to move on. Thank you, Representative. We also have a couple other members online too, but we got a motion, got a second. Here, no other discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you.
All right.
Representative Ridley, for HB 1522. I believe we have another bill of yours on the agenda, HB 1532. And I will turn the mic back over to you for that bill.
Okay. Yes, sir. House Bill 1532, LC number 442044. I'm gonna go through this bill, and I'm going to kind of go backwards and a little bit. So just kind of hang with me here. If you look, what this bill is going to do, whenever we pass the first temp bill, some of the requirements in there, far as like insurance, was to have a $300,000 bond. Well, what some of our producers have run into is couldn't find an insurance company to be able to do that $300,000 bond. So what we're doing, if you look on line 66, we're going to lower that to $100,000. This will let our producers actually get to working and being able to get those bonds that's required in order to get the license. And that's the first thing we're going to do. The other thing we're going to do, if you remember, the fee was pretty extensive. So what we're going to do on part of it is lower the fee to $650. But that's also going to include retailers that sell any kind of hemp products. And if you look down there on line 81, it's talking about, I'm sorry. Let me go back. Line 48, line 50 right here talks about the processing permit issued for 1 calendar year for the annual permit fee. It was $25,000. It's going to be $650. That kind of puts us in line with some other states. It's close to us. And I agree. I heard somebody say that, and I agree that it should kind of been that to start with. And then on the last part of this, the last part of this in section 6, line 79, is going to actually establish a food license, and it will also be $650. And the reason we're doing that is because if you'll turn back to page 2, which in section 2, starting on line 24, it goes through here talking about this right here is actually processing the hemp plant for food, edibles, that kind of stuff. Right now, we're getting all this stuff from out of state. And what we want to do is to be able to have this stuff in state. If we got our producers growing this product here, we want them to be able to put that in foods here and sell it. And right now they can't. So this is kind of what this section right here is going to do. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions that I'll try to answer.
Okay, thank you. See some questions, Chairman Corbett.
Couple questions. How many processors do we have left in the state now that's actually producing, processing?
One.
One. All right. So second follow-up question, if you the second question, by lowering the fee on the processors and by putting the wholesalers and retailers into that, this should help make the program sustainable, bringing in the revenue where it be actually support itself.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you'd have a program. Right now, we've got one producer, and I mean, they can't get it. They can't get the required bond. So we're going to have to lower that down. And then by lowering the fee down, that's actually somebody, I mean, that's not a big record breaking fee to try to overcome in a production that we really don't know where it's going to go right now. I mean, we know this has got to evolve. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think we're actually going to be able to have people growing and more people active in it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to ask Commissioner Black, see him here. If you could come to the podium, please, sir. Welcome to the Ag Committee. And we'll let you speak to the.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee,
to
good
this
to see y'all today. If I can go back, I know time's short, but I when we think about the previous bill that Representative Gullett had in mind, a point came to mind that you can have, if you've got cattle, there can be great horror and great exhilaration take place within about 3 minutes of each other when you get that call from a sheriff, like my good friend from Sheriff Gullett. She says, well, your cows are out. It's 1:30 in the morning. And then 3 minutes later, that's horror. Exhilaration comes when 3 minutes later you find out they're not yours and they're somebody else's. So some of you, everybody that's got cattle knows that. Mr. Chairman, I don't come to argue on this. We want to see this industry develop. It's had lots of speed bumps along the way. We've tried. I know Representative Chairman Corbett has worked diligently on this for years. We're going to provide y'all from the hemp lawyer that the General Assembly appointed. We're going to provide y'all about 6 pages of observations of this legislation that make it very difficult. I'd love to see a fiscal analysis before we do anything else to see how is it going to adjust the funds, because I went through I would say not grueling, but some serious questioning during the appropriations process on the money that is dedicated now, saying, do we still need all this since the industry itself is somewhat floundering? And you see what I'm saying? We've set up a program. We've set the tools in place. We've hired the people. And I've already had questioning from some of your colleagues saying, do we still need those people? You see, so we can't have it both ways. Either we commit to an industry and we properly fund it and we know intentionally what we're doing, or I'm just a big intentional person. If we're going to do it, let's have a good plan. Let's make sure that step by step, we're not passing something that we come back later and read and say, I wonder what we voted on. And that's not a criticism of this. It's just, I'm just trying to say there are lots of realities tied to it that I asked the committee because if you're going to put, how many more inspectors are we going to put on the field to go check what's in a convenience store? The funding initiatives, I think I'm told, and we've had some discussions, that probably works pretty well in Florida from a standpoint of balancing out where more people are paying. But how many more? Do we know how much money that is? And then are y'all going to be willing to dedicate that money to fund the program? Those are just serious questions from a policy standpoint as the state that we have to be real about. And so we'd love to provide this for you, Mr. Chairman. And as always, when we do things at last minute, you're going to always hear me urge caution, but not intending to be a stumbling block. But the hemp lawyer who y'all funded to study these issues, we're providing you the paper of those observations, and then hopefully that will help if the bill moves. You choose to move the bill, and maybe this will help as it goes down if it makes it across during crossover. But I appreciate you letting me share that, and look forward to. I want to be found being part of the solution and not the problem. But it is there's very good things in here that y'all need to see.
Thank you for
Thanks,
those
sir.
comments. Could you stay? I've got a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
Fairly specific though. And the bill does several things, but one of them is lower the bond. I have heard.
Yeah.
Could you speak to that? Have you got any real knowledge about the feasibility of what's happening now
Yes, sir.
with that number?
Well, the intent was early on when the bond was established to that was to make it just like other commodity bonds because this is a commodity. Remember what the bond is to do is to protect the farmer from people who do not pay them. Okay, that's why you have a bond. Because farmers put all the money in the crop, and when they have it contracted and a company does not pay the farmer, then over the terms of that bond, the farmer can call on that bond. It's just the way it was in grain. We chose 300 because I think that's what the 250, 300 is where the grain bond is set. And so that was to mirror some of the other aspects in current code. But also remember, that's a bond from a bonding company. The bond can also be satisfied with a CD or something else that is pledged to. So the bond there can be met, but it is true. It's a difficult. It's certainly not as easy to get as a bonding. Or we can have a letter of credit too. All those things serve the same things, but actually a performance or a security bond. No doubt that those were a little more difficult to find, a little more difficult needle to thread.
Thank you. I know we've got a few questions, and they might have questions later for you.
Yes,
So hold on, but I was going to ask, I see my former colleague Jay Roberts out here. Would you like to speak to the bill or, and from a processor point of view, if you could come?
Yes, sir. And I know there are others. I'll shoot another text and see how many have actually paid their processor's license, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
But it is less than 10. It was 3 or 4, 5 last time I checked, but I'll go check that too.
Okay, that was my other question. Thanks for
Yes, sir.
mentioning that. Up there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can say this is the first time I've actually come before the committee after sitting on it for 7 terms, but it is good to be back with y'all. Let me say that. I agree with the commissioner from the standpoint that if we're going to have a program, let's have a program. Currently today, we don't have a program. I mean, let's be honest. Processor that I represent cannot get a license today because of the $300,000 bond. I've talked to 23 different bonding companies and cannot get a $300,000 bond simply because it is an emerging, growing business in the state of Georgia. And there is not enough data and all there for them to get it. They can get a $100,000 bond, but it is to protect the farmer. But however, the way our law is written, they have to get a bond in order to get a license. Even if they don't have any growers growing, they still have to get that bond in order to be able to process this, unless I misunderstand the law. But that's what I'm being told. So in order for them to be able to be a processor and actually get a license, they have to be able to get that bond. And currently today they cannot. So that's why we're asking for it to go back down to 100,000 versus 300,000. And I know why we put it at 300,000 last year was try to go back up. And I get that. And I think as we move forward with this program in this state, that at the end of in a few years, you'll be able to get that $300,000 bond, but currently today they cannot. So that's part of it. The commissioner also talked about making sure that the money goes toward the program. I agree with him. And HB 170, most of y'all remember that Transportation Funding Act. We put language in that bill that said that if the fees that are collected do not go toward the program, this was transportation, or go toward transportation, this would be toward the hemp program, then after the first year, they cut in half. If after the second year, they don't go toward the program, then they go away. So this is a way to actually fund the program at a $650 fee that will allow you to go out, collect from the wholesalers, the retailers, and the processors within the state of Georgia. And yes, I can't tell you how much money it's going to generate, but I can tell you if you ride up and down the road, you see every place that's selling CBD right now. So you think of all that that's coming, that'll come in. That will actually give the department the ability and the resources to go out and make sure that they are selling what they say they're selling, that they can then go out and test that product and make sure that what's in it is what they say is in it. Currently today, they don't have those resources. Now, getting back to the bill, I know there's a lot of concern about the products as we talk about it here, as we define hemp products. I understand that, but currently today, they're being sold all throughout the state of Georgia. However, Georgia companies cannot produce these. They can produce oil and oil alone. That's it. They can't produce gummies. They can't put it in food. They can't do anything. But other companies are going to benefit from that. Companies not inside the state of Georgia today. So that's an issue that we're trying to correct, to try to allow Georgia companies to be able to benefit and do this. And I agree. I mean, the definition may be something that needs to be worked on. We're willing to whatever it takes to try to get this bill moving and moving forward. We're okay with that, but to keep it alive, to be able to work through the process today. But I mean, when a lot of people want to say, well, the feds say this or the feds say that. U.S. Department of Justice sent a letter to Alabama on this issue. And if you look at it, it basically says anything below 0.3 THC is legal. And I think that's where we're all coming at today. Nobody wants us out there selling medical cannabis or out there selling hemp that is above 0.3 THC. We all agree with that. But what we're trying to do is to take Georgia companies, allow them to be viable, and allow them to continue to grow, allow them to prosper and make revenue from this program. If we're going to have a hemp program, if we're not going to have a hemp program, we're not serious about it. Okay, that's fine. But I've got a client who spent $4 million buying the equipment to go in to extract from that hemp product, the oil and everything else, $4 million. And today it's really not with just the oil. They're selling oil and that's all they can sell, but they're selling oil. But if they could go in and produce CBD gummies and things like that, that could be a lot more profitable. Mr. Chairman, I probably said more than I should, but I kind of get a little passionate about this as well. So, but I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. I think that's a good point of view where we might be. We're the committee, we're got another committee behind us and we're gonna have to adjourn here very, very shortly. I see Chairman Corbett, if you'd like to speak back to this, and then I'm gonna let the commissioner, maybe I see him back there, might want to talk, and then Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question for Mr. Roberts. We talked to someone that represents the convenience stores. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
About this, and would
Yes, sir.
they have an issue in his opinion with the license?
No, sir. They would not.
Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. I think my question was answered. Thank you for your comments and thank you, Representative Ridley, for bringing this. I've talked to multiple people. We need to move forward in this. Georgia is in a very unique place to be number one in hemp and solar, if I might add, solar energy. And I think Florida is leading now, and I would like to see Georgia do that. My question is for Commissioner Black. When shall we receive that 6-page document? Did he leave?
He left.
Okay. Chairman,
I tell you what, I'll make the commitment that I'll try to get with the department too and try to get that to the chairman to disseminate out.
Okay.
great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Floor leader.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know the time is short. If we could ask Ledge Council, Mr. Chairman, in terms of products being sold in Georgia versus manufactured and sold in Georgia, is there current code that allows for the sale of those THC products in convenience stores?
Not to my knowledge, and I would defer to the Department of Agriculture if there's something I'm not aware of, but I'm not aware of anything that addresses that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we are out of time and I apologize. I'd love to hear from the committee. We might could schedule another committee meeting if there's interest from the committee on looking at this bill and narrowing it down, whatever we need to do. Y'all can just get with me, maybe privately or text or call. But I hate we are out of time with this, and I know it needs some more attention. I'm sorry it came to us late. But we got a good process up here and we'll continue that process at a later date. Meeting adjourned.